Quoting not an economist, but John Lennon, just imagine for a minute. Imagine a place that has double-digit inflation and unemployment, where productivity and morale is low, where there's regular strikes. The place is very fearful, very closed to international trade and investment, basically scared of foreign people, scared of immigrants and students, scared of people coming and scared of people going. There's very few good Asian restaurants and everyone drinks beer. The only wine that's drunk is out of a cool bar cask. Well, you don't have to imagine too hard because that's basically my home state of South Australia 30 years ago, and indeed it reflects much of Australia as a whole. Australia had a very difficult economic situation, was very protected and isolated. The term tyranny of distance was often used. And South Australia was in many ways one of the worst performing states in Australia. It had a manufacturing industry, a Milky Bar economy where we tried to sell cars and washing machines to the eastern states. We very rarely, except for some industries like the wine industry, thought about international markets, particularly in Asia. Well, a lot has happened in 30 years. Hawke and Keating flooded the dollar, reduced tariffs. We've seen incredible change in Australia and South Australia. We've seen an opening up of the economy and of the society. When I started university, 11 out of 15 of my honours class came from Singapore. And in fact, we had about a third of the people at our university from Asia. That not only improved our economy, but it also improved a lot of the education standards within South Australia. For sure, with me, being an economics student, I suddenly had some very smart Singaporean and Malaysian students who not only taught me econometrics, but they taught me how to cook noodles too. And this is before Po and MasterChef became part of the Adelaide scene. Well, the fear has been now lost, and not only are we now no longer fearful of foreign students or immigrants, we're also no longer fearful of people leaving the state. When I was at high school, Western Australia took over South Australia's population for the first time, and people were very, very scared of the brain drain of the best and brightest leaving South Australia to work in other states and other countries. In fact, I once wrote an article for the Adelaide Advertiser about the number of people in media, in business, in entertainment and in sport who were originally from Adelaide but were settled in Sydney and elsewhere. In fact, I went to a function in Sydney and also in Dubai where the state government basically made a very strong pitch for people to go back to their home state, making us almost feel like traitors in our midst. Well, that's changed now. I was recently in London with the new young Premier of South Australia, Jay Weatherill. At the event, Jay Weatherill, instead of berating people for leading South Australia, actually talked about how proud he was of the great things they were doing in London and in Europe and what great ambassadors they were making for the state. At the same time, he appointed me as South Australia's first ever advisor for global engagement, a new first for a state or regional government anywhere in the world. My job is to take Generation Expat, the wonderful South Australian people that are doing great things in London, in Shanghai, in New York, in Singapore, in India, and even in Sao Paulo and in Santiago in South America, and basically enable them to be part of the conversation of the future of the state's brand, the state's vision, and the changing nature of the South Australian economy. Not only overseas, but also here in Sydney and other parts of Australia, we have a very vibrant South Australian community. And just because they've left the state for opportunities in employment or family reasons, there's no reason why they can't be part of that conversation. Whilst 30 years ago, we drank it out of a cask, South Australia is now one of the leading exporters in the world of fine wine, and it's been part of South Australia's brand and South Australia's culture. In fact, if you look at the economic history of South Australia, it was immigration that helped produced the wine industry, the German immigrants in the 19th century that set up the Barossa, and more recently the Italian immigrants that have developed the wine industry further, just as Pau has developed our cuisine with immigration from Malaysia. Secondly, education plays an important role. We have very strong university studies in wine in South Australia now. When I go to Mendoza in Argentina or Chile, or indeed in Bordeaux in France, I find Adelaide winemakers designing technology, skills and training for the French and for the South Americans to develop their own industries, and indeed for the South Africans. In many ways I was very proud to meet some leading McLaren Vale winemakers in France, because teaching the French how to make wine is a bit like beating England in cricket. Very, very satisfying. So in short, South Australia has lost its fear. It's now no longer scared of people coming, whether they be immigrants or foreign students. They're no longer scared of people going. We're going to find that Generation Expat and Generation Export are going to come together well to provide a very strong economic, cultural and educational future for the state of South Australia and the creative capital of Adelaide.